Am I on, or do we have more to do?
You're it.
Okay, good. Well, first of all, I want to apologize for not being there. I don't know if Stuart was able to tell you why, but I wanted to say how pastoral he was to me when I was frantic telling him why. Um, some of you, or most of you, would know that I'm about to leave and go to another place. So I need a house to live in, and I'm trying to close on the house. And it has just been like several days of heartache about getting that done, but I think we have it done. I just finished it like 15 minutes ago, but I had to be here to close along with my wife and physically with two witnesses, so I couldn't be on Orcas Island. And I regret that because I wanted to be in that space with you, and I wanted to be with all of you today. But I'm thankful for the wonders of modern technology and that we can at least do it this way. And I'm looking forward to being with you this way. And if I was there in the space, I'd say the same thing. Thank you for coming out. I know Stuart and many people there have worked really hard to pull this day off. And I was so excited to do one of these on the island. And alas, here I stand. So I'm very sorry about that, but it's good to see you. I also want to say I'm going to make some remarks this morning or this afternoon. And then I'm going to come back on later in the day to be with you for any questions that you have, but I'm also happy to take those now. So I'm going to speak for a little bit, and then I'll turn it back over to Stuart. And then if you want to do questions now, we certainly can. Does that sound good?
Yes.
Everybody still hearing me? All right, good. So I thought I'd start today with three stories. The stories are kind of my stories of my journey with stewardship and with giving in the church. The first one, and some of you have probably heard me tell these stories, but they're instrumental in my life as a steward in our faith. The first one happened when I was quite young. I was probably 6 or 7 years old. We say in the South that it's everybody's birthright. You have to be a Baptist at some point. And so I was in the South, and I was young, and I was at a Baptist church. And our Sunday school teacher, actually one day I came in, and she had, in front of all of our places, she had 10 dimes lined up in front of all of our seats. And we were so excited. And she explained to us that 10 dimes made $1, and she held up a dollar bill. And then she started talking about what God wants us to do with our money. And what she said was, first of all, God is the giver of all things, including the money we have, the money we carry in our pockets, the money we're given. And she said, so today I'm going to give you these 10 dimes. You get to take them home today. They're yours. I gave them to you. So, of course, we were all excited and thinking about all the things we were going to do with our 10 dimes. And then she began talking to us about the Bible and what the Bible says about giving. And so she explained that 1/10 of these 10 dimes is 1 dime, and that the Bible asks us, thus, as she said, God asks us to give 10% of what we're given away. And so she said, pick up one of those dimes, and we did. And she said, when I pass the plate, you're going to put that 1 dime in, and then you get to take these 99 dimes and 90 cents, and you get to take that. You get to walk out of this room with that. But you need to never forget that God gave you that, and God expects you to take care of those things. Now, sometimes when I tell this story, people say, well, that's just a shameless abuse of small children, And yes, I say it's shameless, but it's effective because it really, really worked on me. At 6 or 7 years old, I totally got that. It was not abstract. It was completely clear. And I will just tell you, because I'm kind of that kind of Myers-Briggs type, an EFTJ, that it just stuck with me, so that I've always been a tither. If something comes into my hands, money comes into my hands, I give 10% of it away. I've always done that. So it had a huge impact on me. Second story is when I was much older. I was a hospital administrator, actually, before I went to seminary. And there was a doctor that especially despised me. I've always been in professions where it's just a certain number of people have to despise you. Okay, so this doctor really did. So to get me back one day, he actually invited me for a meeting. I didn't realize the meeting was while he was doing an autopsy. And he did this on purpose, I know, because he thought, well, I'll just gross the guy out. He can't possibly say no to me about anything while I'm sitting here doing an autopsy. And you'll be maybe glad to know that I made it through it, but actually it was ineffective because I don't remember a thing he said or asked. I just remember watching him cut into this person and literally throwing their organs across the room into this bucket while he was talking to me. And I remember thinking in my head, no matter who we are, no matter what we have, no matter what our status was in this world, we all end right here. We all end right here. And we can't take anything with us. As Carl Knerk used to say, there are no luggage racks on a hearse. And that is exactly what I thought of when I was watching that autopsy. I thought, this is all of us end up here, no matter who we are in this world. Had a huge impact on me. Third story. When I was in my first position as a vicar of a mission in Arkansas, I was challenged by my stewardship mentor to tell the congregation exactly what I make and exactly what I give. I mean, to the penny, percentages and all. And the first year I refused to do it. I was frightened to do it. Second year, I decided to do it. And I sent out a letter that said, here's what I do. I wouldn't ask you to do anything that I'm not willing to do myself. And I laid it out. I mean, you all pay me this much. 10% of that is this much. I give this much to the church and this much to other things that I believe in. And I put it the exact dollar amount. Some of you have been in this diocese long enough to know that I did that for a few years. I've done that several times while I've been your bishop because I learned in that moment and really believed in it. But when I sent that letter out, of course, I went inside my office and locked the door because I was frightened of what people would think. You know, what will they say? We don't talk about money like this in the church. And of course, the phone started to ring. And the first call, my secretary stuck her head in and said, she named the woman. She's on the phone and it's about that letter. So I braced myself and got on the phone. And there was a very quiet woman that I knew. I knew she was kind of tangentially connected to that parish. She was a C&E Christian, you know, Christmas and Easter. She'd show up when she needed sacramental things done, but pretty much was not really connected to the church other than that. But she, on the other end of the line, she said, I got your letter. And she said, I want you to hear me say this. I give more to my cleaning lady than I give to this church. And I didn't know what to say to that. And she said it again. I give more to my cleaning lady than I give to this church. And then she started to cry. And she said, I've never had a letter that was so unabstract. It was so clear. And it gave me perspective that my priorities are way out of balance. Now, a lot of people hear me tell this story and say, well, maybe your cleaning lady needed the money more than the church. That all might be true. Her point, though, just, you know, if you can get on her train of her thought, was that her priorities were out of line. And so she and I literally sat there and wept together about that. And I said, this is the one thing we avoid in the church, is kind of talking about this in specificity. And it gives us a way to be in denial about the power of money and what it does to us in our life. I actually believe Jesus knew full well the power of money. And it's been true in all of human history, really. Some means of exchange has been part of our life, and we're marinated in it, no matter who we are in a society. And everybody understands it. Jesus talked about this thing, money and possessions, more than any other single topic in all the New Testament. And I believe he did that because of this very fact, that he knew that's something all of us have to deal with, all of us have to live with, all of us have to grapple with. And so we can all relate to it. I believe he really, really knew that. So, unlike many people who want us to stop talking about money in the church, I actually think we need to start talking about it a lot more. Because anything that has that kind of power over us also has the potential to draw us away from what should have the most power over us, which is God and our belief in God and our faith in God and our walk with God. And Jesus knew that too. So those three stories kind of sum up my journey with tithing. I've mechanically been a tither because I thought that's what I was supposed to do. But you need to understand, and many of you will, that biblically and in the First Testament, the Old Testament, 10% was the expectation. But even in Judaism, that's exactly what it was. 10% was expected. You actually were not considered to be a giving person until you went over 10%. So we can actually find scripture that says that alms only begin, alms, giving. You can only be a giving person if it goes beyond 10%. So this is still practiced in in lots of Judaism, still practiced. I know Christians get upset sometimes when you talk about the tithe. I will tell you, in some synagogues, they actually ask you for your tax report every year, and then they tell you what your 10% gift is. So I don't know. Do you want to go to that? I'd love to go to that myself, but it's actually against what happened later, which is Jesus came and said 10% isn't enough. What did Jesus say? I can hear you, actually. So anybody want to answer? What did Jesus come and say? Yep. Jesus came and said, 10% is not nearly good enough. I want everything, 100%. And the scripture, that talks about leave everything on the corner and walk away, it's 100%. And the reality is we can't survive in this world in 100% world. All right. You can't go put all your stuff on the corner and expect to survive. So we're left as Christians with this idea of what is it to be a steward then? And in a minute, I'll tell you a story that captured that for me, about what it is we do to be a steward. How do we give 100% in a world that expects us to live off 9 dimes, for instance? How do we do that? Now, today is about legacy giving, so I do want to hit on that and say, I think legacy giving is not just about money. In fact, I would argue that it's less about money and it's more about the act. It's about modeling. It's about how you live your life and where you believe the life you have was given to you. It's about directionality. It's not just about money. So legacy, yes, is about something we will leave after we're gone, but it's really about modeling now how it is you give and how you would like your ancestors to give, the people that follow you to give. So I want to share with you a thing that I do either on my birthday or the week of my birthday. It's a ritual I go through every year. And my birthday is in June. So every June I do this. I go to the lockbox, I get my will out, I get my funeral plan out. I have 2 letters, one letter to my son, one letter to my wife. I get those out. I read them. I decide, is this still the letter I want them to get if something happens? Now, I won't tell you what's in that letter, but my wife's letter starts out with, if you're reading this, I probably did something stupid. And she knows exactly what that means because I'm always out doing something stupid and adventurous. And she says, you're going to kill yourself. And so, that's how my letter starts with her. But every year I go through that and say, is this still what this letter needs to say? And I go over my funeral plan. And that one act will get you in touch with your mortality like nothing else. And many people avoid this exercise. They even avoid what you're doing today because they don't want to get any closer to the fact that all of us will die. All of us will come to that fate. And we just don't want to talk about it. But I would say, again, we need to talk about it more, not less. So I do that ritual every single year. And I can tell you, I think it's a rich thing. You can go over your will at the same time to make sure that's still what you would like it to be. Today, you're going to learn lots of mechanics about how to make that work better for you. I think for sure you'll hear probably from a financial expert about donor advised funds. Those were like one of the greatest revelations to me, and I love it as a way to manage your tax liability, also manage your giving. And I think it's a great instrument for use in a will. What I love about it is my will simply says whatever the percentages I have in my donor advised fund at that time are the percentages that will be used to give to those entities out of my will. So my wife and I have decided to leave 20% of our estate to charity. And all we have to do is use the donor advised fund to say, here's the percentages and this is what we give to. And we can go in and change that every day if we wanted to. But on the day that we die, whatever those percentages are, the will refers to that as where it will go. So you don't have to change your will every single time. You just change the donor advised fund. I'm eking off into technicalities, but I think it's a wonderful thing. And I hope you talk about that today too. Of course, if you remember anything in this diocese in your will, if you remember your local parish and you give to it, if you remember the diocese, the office of the bishop somehow, and you give to it, if you give to St. Andrew's House, to Camp Houston, any diocesan entity, you are automatically a member of the Bishop Society. And for that, you get typically a certificate suitable for framing and a nice warm feeling. That's all you get. I think you also get maybe a tie tack that you can wear that says Bishop Society, but you're a member of it. And if any of you remember Canon Carl Knurk, who was on my staff when I came here, God rest his soul, he built up our Bishop Society here, and I think this is still true. We have more members in our Bishop Society in Olympia than any other diocese in the Episcopal Church. We have close to 2,000 people that are members of it. You don't have to disclose what you've given to or the amount or anything. You just have to disclose that, yes, in fact, you have remembered the diocese somehow in your will. Another technical thing that you will learn about today is something we just started this year, and it's called Free Will. And it's actually a online will program. So that you could, perhaps even today, but any day, log on and complete a legal Washington will. It will be a simple one, but you can actually do it and accomplish it, because this is the one thing people put off more than anything else, is getting a will. So the diocese is providing you a free way to do this. And if it doesn't get fully explained today, all you have to do is call, and I will help you, or anybody in our office will help you try to get on that and to make use of that. So I'm going to end with one thing that people find is kind of peculiar. and that is, I actually believe we ought to do offerings at funerals. In fact, when I do one, I insist upon it. And the reason I bring this up is that often when you bring that up, people will say, "Oh, how gauche. I mean, how terrible to do an offering at a funeral." But I want to tell you, I think it's actually something we're called to do. I even go as far as thinking that a Eucharist is not valid unless you have an offering. It's actually a rubric in the prayer book. So any Eucharist ought to have an offering. And at a funeral, the offering ought to go to something that that person loved and wanted to give to. And I can just tell you, when we do it, it's often a very moving thing for people that are there too, because they often say, "I wanted to give somehow to something this person loved, but I didn't know what that was." I'll tell you one story about that I did a funeral for a retired priest that I didn't even know. He was living out of the diocese, but he died, and we did a celebration of life for him at a church here. And I learned about this priest. He had spent 18 years in Africa in a very small village, and that village loved him and revered him. And so when he died, I did the funeral. There were only about 13 people present at the funeral. But I asked the priest, I said, "We are going to do an offering, right?" And he said, "Well, I didn't think so, because there's only a few people here, and I don't usually do that." And I said, "Well, we're going to do it today." And so I told the crowd about this priest. I shared that he had spent 18 years in this village in Africa, and that we were going to take an offering and send it to that village in his memory. And so there were, like I said, 12 or 13 people there. When we were finished with the service, there was $800 and some change in the offering plate. And I thought that was fantastic. And a woman stopped me at the back door, and she said, "When are you going to send that?" I said, "Well, I'm not going to send it for a while, because I've got to get it to the office and put it in accounting." She said, "Okay, I'm going to send you $1,000 to add to it." So we sent $1,800 to this little village in Africa in memory of this priest, that had we not done that, none of that would have happened. And I would say it's not just that the least of this story is that little village in Africa got $1,800. The greatest thing about this story is that the people that were there got to give. They got to be generous. They got to participate in this person's legacy also. So I just challenge you to think differently about that. All of these stories I've told you are great stories, but for instance, the woman who called about her cleaning lady, I told you that she was tangentially a part of that congregation, and she was. She wasn't well known. I didn't know her very well. But when I left that church about 5 years later, she was senior warden. And that is the best part of this story. And I could tell you stories all day long similar to that, where that's the punchline. It's not that they decided they were going to give more money. It's that they decided the priority was the church. The priority was being part of the body of Christ. And so many of these stories end with a person that was very disconnected being very connected and in leadership in the church. So this is about so much more than dollars. And if you haven't gotten that from this talk, then I have totally failed. But if you have gotten that, then this is going well. So I want to thank you for letting me regale you a little bit before you do some good work today. I'm happy to answer any questions now or to come back. I think Stuart would like me to come back about 3:30, and I'll do that and join you for the rest of the time out of 3:30, and we can do some of it now. But I'm happy to I was going to be there with you anyway, so I have nothing else to do at the moment. So, Stuart, where would you like to go now?
Uh,
I wanted to start why we do this, to talk about wills and legacy and dying. It is from our prayer book. It's in the prayer book. And it's interesting what it says is the minister of the congregation is directed to instruct people from time to time about the duty of Christian parents to make prudent provision for the well-being of their families and of all persons, not only parents, to make wills while they are in health, arranging for the disposal of their temporal goods, not neglecting, if they are able, to leave bequests for religious and charitable uses. That instruction comes in the blessing and in the thanksgiving of children. And the focus is precisely the children, to make sure that our descendants, the people we love, the charities we cherish, the religious communities that we cherish, are taken care of after us. So it's in that context of thanksgiving for the birth of a child that this instruction is found. Now, I have to be honest, it's a challenging topic. I've never met anybody talking about these things with a little bit of squirmish. First, the money issue is always who gets what. It's always difficult. A challenging topic, first of all, is because we are fearful of dying and death. And a lot of people tell me it's not really the death part, it's the dying part. That's the difficult one, especially suffering. A second area related to that is our spiritual beliefs, our religious beliefs, how those help me or hinder me approaching my dying and my death. What is the place of suffering in life? How do I approach it? What are my beliefs and how do they help me in this transition? Or, to be honest, some religious spiritual beliefs are more of a hindrance. If they're founded on blame and shame and guilt, these can be terrible. So that's a second area of this challenging topic. And when I was talking, the main thing Hugh and I were talking about what is our contribution is to make ourselves available for those difficult conversations. The third point, death denial. This is the more serious one I found. What I feel is many people reject simply the idea that we're dying. And it's interesting that funerals, little by little, I have a person, I don't like that name. It's a celebration of life. And I get the point, but little by little, death is disappearing. There's no body. There's not even a funeral. There's not a committal. And little by little, death is out of the way, out of our sight. And I wonder what that means. There could be very good reasons. I don't like funerals, whatever. But I invite us all to think, why? Is it any difficulty I have with the reality of death that I'm trying to avoid it no matter what? These last two are things that, these last three, I heard them from a physician. And I want to mention a little medical things, not because I'm a doctor, but it's an important part that we're not going to be discussing today. We have the financial, legal part, spiritual parts, but there is a very important part, the medical part. And I wanted to mention these things. These last three, death denial, the technological advances, and the myth of medical resuscitation comes from a doctor that I was hearing talking about these. He says, these three areas are the most difficult in the medical profession, and I feel in the spiritual pastoral sense. Denying death, this is not happening, but technological advances that allow us to prolong life to a certain point beyond the body's ability. We can prolong life incredibly more. But what does that mean? What does that mean with quality of life? I can have someone breathing for many years. That's possible. And many of the doctors, his concern was the denial of death meant that that body will be kept on. The family wanted that. So that brings a very important discussion that I want to invite you to talk with your healthcare provider. What do you want? Technologically, what do you want to be treated like? How long? What is acceptable and what is not acceptable? When am I dead? The question is, that obviously it was in certain, he's not breathing, he's dead. Nowadays, it's not that easy. You can be breathing, and your brain is gone. There's all these different areas that are important to discuss and talk with your doctor, and to have it very clear what you want and what you don't want. Finally, there was one thing that the doctor was mentioning, the myth of medical resuscitation. In TV, about 80-90% of those who have a crisis survive. He says in real life, probably it's the opposite. And the idea, the expectation that you get to the hospital and everything is gonna happen. Don't worry. They put that thing and boom, boom, you're awake. It's not as easy as that. Which faces us with the reality is, what do I want? What are my wishes? So the next. So I have this little bit, you'll get this paper. This is like a little bingo card. These are two areas. I'm not a doctor, I'm not a funeral director, but I wanted to mention it simply to have you think about it and sit down with your healthcare provider. The end-of-life choices, your pulsed, meaning the physician order for life-sustaining treatment that is put usually in the refrigerator. I think it's colored green, right? It's a very brilliant color. Do you have that? Have you spoken with your primary care physician about your wishes? Do not resuscitate orders. Have you talked with your spouse, your loved one, your doctor about foregoing treatment? Either not starting it because you wish not to start it, or because you want to discontinue those. Those are difficult questions, choices to make, but are important ones to have. What is hospice? What is palliative care? These are matters of importance. The voluntary stopping of eating and drinking, another option, choosing to actively participate in your death. Death with dignity here in Washington State. We have the ability to tell the doctor to give us a medicine and end our own life, medical aid in dying. And palliative sedation is another option. This is from End of Life, and I'll be sharing in e-news. There's a Zoom meeting Wednesday, November 2nd at 10:30 in the morning, talking about these end-of-life choices, the different aspects of it with doctors. And I'll share that information because I think it's important to know all these different options that we have here. Advanced healthcare directives, there's a whole slew of institutions that offer living wills. The Advanced Care Plan Registry, which is the one that's recommended by the Department of Health in Washington State. End of Life Washington, the People's Memorial Association, which is a group of funeral directors, funeral agencies that have created a nonprofit, and Five Wishes, which is the one you have in the front that has a more religious component to it. Just to let you know, there's this Alzheimer dementia mental health advanced directives, which exists. There is a document. I'm not going to talk about it. I'm not a doctor. Talk with your physician about it. The durable power of attorney for healthcare. Who do you want to make these decisions? Organ donation. And where do you keep these things? The U.S. Living Will Registry has a place where you put all these, and they give you a number and a little card. When you go to a hospital, you have that card and it's part of the whole hospital system. They will know what is your wishes. On the other side, there's the funeral part. What do you want to do with your body? Here in Washington State, we have different options. It's not black and white. Burial, the traditional, cremation, a green burial, alkaline hydrolysis, or the natural organic reduction, as we know, the composting part. It's not allowed here, and I was checking to see if we could do it here, but not yet here in Orcas Island. Where do you want your body to be kept? Do you want it to be buried here in the niche of our church? A plot somewhere being scattered? And I put in parenthesis, kept. My experience with people not facing death is that many times the cremated remains end up in a closet because we don't know what to do with it. And there's either an attachment on not letting go, but what do we want our remains to, where do we want them? My dad already told me, we have a little island in Puerto Rico, La Isla de los Ratones. I want over there by the mangroves. That's where I want to be. When you're bathing in the ocean, you just look over there, the little island, and you know that's where I am. Where do we want? And if you do not say it, you might end in a closet. And if that's good for you, awesome. Stay in the closet. In a church I used to work, I had a woman who had her daughter's remains in a shopping bag. And everywhere she went, she kept the ashes and she would show them. She would go to coffee hour with them, go to the shopping mall, and she always carried these remains. I always wondered what would she had wanted to happen. Do you have the information accessible? Information for your death certificate. The obituary, what you would like to be said about you. Who are the people you would like to contact? And I'm going to give a little list that gives just who I want to share the information about my death. Who is my designated agent? And this one I have experienced as a priest, some difficulty. When there is some division in the family, and you did not share what you wanted, there are different appreciations of what is supposed to happen. And me as the priest, I stand there and I have, let's say, the daughter, this is what's going to happen, but then there's this other son who says, no, this is what's going to happen. What is it that you want? And especially if there is some disagreements in the family, who is going to talk? Who is going to organize it? And it's the person you trust the most to follow your will, your choices. One of the difficult things I've also found is some children do not care about any religious thing. And when I'm not interested in this, I don't care about it. And I'm just burying mom or dad and they're done. And I always wonder, what would you want? Even if it's difficult for them, and we know that we have many people who are very adverse of religious stuff, and they would not want anything. If you tell me or Hugh or whoever is the priest here, this is what I want, we will do it. We will do it with your body present or not. It doesn't matter. We will honor you. We will pray for you. We will do what is needed. Where are the funds for all these arrangements? As you know, the church, we do not charge anything for burials here, for the funeral service or the reception here. But where's the money for the cremation or the burial or whatever the other ways you can dispose of your body? And finally, also, where's the documents for all this? Where do they keep them? So I wanted to very briefly, but I want you to be aware of all the different pieces of this puzzle. The medical side, talk with your doctor. Not with me, this is not my department, but I wanted to make us aware that there's all these different areas, and I need to make a choice. And I need to make that choice known to my loved ones and the people who make decisions for me. The one that I care more and is the spiritual part, which is these 4 areas, and I mentioned it on Sunday. First is the pastoral care. All the rituals we do end up just being vain, superstitious, you might call them, if they do not express a reality of what we want. Hugh and I know any priest, will be more than happy to sit down and talk about this. Talk about it. What is the fear? What is the uncomfortability about these things? What do you want to be done? How do you want to be helped in this transition? And as I mentioned on Sunday, it's not only the funeral part. That's one little part. There's all these different resources that we have before dying, at the moment of dying, literally, and then after death. There's a ton, and I'm going to give you, when I go to the tables on this side and Hugh on that side, I'll give you a list of all the resources that we have as the Episcopal Church of different rituals. And I value rituals very much because rituals are the physical manifestation, representation of what we believe, what we hope for. And I truly, honestly believe rituals can bring so much comfort. And they're kind of like a trellis that help you hold on. And as I mentioned the story on Sunday, one of our parishioners, that was the most important thing. The family said, what would we have done in the silence waiting for dying? It's the ritual, the prayers, the actions that we did help carry the moment and give it meaning and comfort and strength in a very difficult time. That's what I meant. The last thing I wanted to mention is very important. Share all this information with your loved ones, family, friends, your priest, of course, your lawyer, your doctor, your financial advisor. Have people know what is it that you want. I think that was it. Yeah.
Thank you, Berto. Our next speaker is Keith Beebe, who will speak to us about...
Yay. He's great. Keith, do you want me to turn
Absolutely.
your own slide? You turn my slide. Okay.
Okay.
Sorry. All right.
Hi, everyone. Sorry, I'm a little groggy. I'm still on Florence, Italy time. So I was up at 3 this morning, and it's now almost midnight. So please write my number down, or I'll leave some cards. One thing I do as a lawyer in a small town is if you call me, I'll talk to you for 20 minutes, a half hour free, just because I know today you'll have questions for Tom and I, and we'll both be probably not able to answer them as you go through it. Sorry, Tom, I just put you down on the list too. Attorneys are the mechanics of this whole process. You decide what you want, you go to your attorney fixes it out. I've got 15 minutes to explain all of this to you, so hit it. When the bishop calls, I'll be gone because I have to leave. When the bishop calls, tell him about the lockbox. Because what he didn't have in his lockbox when he said, oh, I looked at my will, I looked at my letters, he didn't have durable power of attorneys in there. And what I tell my clients before we get to the legacy giving is by far the most important documents you can have is Britney Spears. Everybody remember what happened to that poor Britney? If you don't choose who you want to make your financial and healthcare decisions, a court and somebody else will be lobbying for that job. And they all may be coming from a lovely place. Yes, I want to take care of mom. Mom said that I wanted to do it. No, mom told me. and they're loving people, but it puts them in conflict. So have a good, durable power of attorney. You can have it for healthcare, you can have finances, you can have it both. Effective if something happens to you. So tell the bishop, put it in his lockbox. But don't tell him I said it so, because I'm not at this church. Healthcare directive is another piece. We'll cover that in the end. Guardianship is what you're avoiding. A judge will pick someone if you don't. So pick someone with your durable power of attorney. What you're doing with your last will and testament, whether you use free will and your power of attorney and with your death disposition, is you pick who controls. You make that choice. So they're not all 5 or 6 year kids aren't sitting around a table trying to decide who's the best person to do that. And it's always my older brother. So in this case, you make the choice, and that's probably the most important piece of thing that you do throughout this. Durable power of attorneys, you medical. If you're going to do legacy gifting and you're continuing to do it during your life, you want to make sure to put it in your power of attorney that they can continue to give lawyers, we use this term, a clear pattern of gifting. If you're doing charitable gifting, as a general rule, your power of attorney can't give it away to charities unless or give anything away unless it's specifically addressed. So you want to mention it if you are doing a pattern of giving with your church and in your community. Hit it. Okay. So what I call is the what part is what you are giving while you are alive. One of the biggest things to look at is appreciated property to charity. I am a man of faith. I'm a man of community. We give. But if I can also avoid paying taxes, it's like a double whammy, and I feel kind of guilty doing that. But what happens is this. If you have a piece of property, you have a piece of real estate, you inherited or you held it for a long time, and in this market, it's tremendously appreciated. If you sell it for $100,000 and you pay $10,000 for it, you're going to pay capital gains, 15% of that $90,000, about 15 grand, taxes. And then you turn around and give it to charity. But if you give the property to the charity directly and they sell it, there's no capital gains. So in our minds, in my mind, what I'm doing is taking the taxes away from Washington, D.C. I'm so sorry. I just flew over Air Force Two as I was coming out here. But I would prefer to see it go directly into my community, send it there and get a little bit back. The same thing if you're getting IRAs. You take the money, your required minimum distribution, you have to pay tax on it, and then you write a check to your church. Well, if you take your donations directly from the IRA, you assign it and say, pay it directly, don't let my little paws touch it, up to $100,000 each year, you avoid having to pay income tax on that money. So you're adding whatever your income tax rate to that. And then last, the bishop mentioned these. I love donor advised funds. They are a charity. Your investment types will know about them. And when you give your money to the charity, it's a charitable deduction right then and there. My wife and I did this a few years ago. We were fortunate we bought 25 shares of Microsoft back in 1989. Just scraped our money together, bought it. Fast forward, I sat down with my wife. I said, we give about $20,000 a year to charity. We've been very blessed. I said, are we going to continue to do that? She says, yeah. So we did a donor advised fund. Took that 25 shares that now it's split, I think 6 times, put it all into a donor advised fund. For that year, we got a big tax deduction. Again, I like that part, tax deduction. It makes me feel warm and fuzzy when I say that. But that money, then they sold it. The donor advised fund sold it. There's a big chunk of money in the account. We have to give it to charity, but we get to choose when we pass it out, and it has to go to charity. So we avoid the capital gains we would have gotten whacked with. We can pay it over time, and it's like a video game. You get on and you put Emmanuel Church $3,000 and off it goes. And it's the best part of it is in our will, we give 15% of our estate to charity. And we just have it going to our donor advised fund. It's a charity. So that 15% comes off the top. And then we have listed in our donor advised fund the 10 charities we want it to go to and the percentages. So it's a lovely way to do charitable giving and kind of lump all your gifts into one year and take another tax deduction because you don't normally itemize. So if you talk investment types, donor advised funds are really a simple way to do charitable giving and avoid constantly changing your will because you want to give it to the safe haven for puppies of Nova Scotia or whatever program you read about and do. You can just change your donor advised fund to do that. Okay. The other big thing I saw when I was at St. Paul's is everybody was doing wills, but it's important to know what your will controls. There's probate property and non-probate property. If you say, look, I'm going to give, like Keith Beebe did, 15% of my estate to these 3 charities or to a donor advised fund. If your financial account says pay on death to my 3 children, that doesn't go into the probate. And your will won't control that without a lot of special language, and you're not going to get that with free will. So what you have to be very clear on is what is actually going to be subject to the will and what is not if you're thinking in terms of making a percentage gift of your total estate. Let me give you examples. So say you have $500,000 worth of real estate and you have $400,000 in bank accounts. You say, I want to give 10% of my estate, $90,000 charity, my kids can have the rest. If you think that way, but your $400,000 in the bank account are pay on death to my children, you're only giving $50,000 because the will only cover the real estate, will only pass through probate the real estate. So it takes a little bit of thinking to make sure you don't take everything out of your estate by having your investment accounts go different ways, your bank accounts go different ways, and then your will is only going to cover part of your property. So it can get confusing. So what I recommend, is I like the simple thing. The sum of $50,000 to Berto's surfing fund, or to provide donuts for the staff here. But a specific request, if you have a number in mind, makes it simple. You can 10% of my estate to charity, to my charity of choice, or 10% of my net estate, or $25,000, whichever is less. Because what I tell people, if you only have $25,000, you give it all to the church, poor Nancy won't get a nickel from me, and she'll be in my will. So it does take a little bit of care to think about what is it we're doing. So when your investment, you talk about IRAs, of course you want it to go to your spouse and to your children for tax reasons. But the rest, you may well not want to have it set up so that when somebody shows up with a death certificate, the bank's going to pass that money to them. So you have to be a little bit careful when you're thinking about in your will how you're passing it off. If you do the lump sum, is probably the simplest way. If you're doing free will and you just say, I want to just make sure the church gets this amount, put it in your specific bequest, and whatever is left over goes to wherever you say, to your children and to whoever. If you do the percentages, which is I've obviously done with our will, because hopefully our estate keeps going up and we give more and more to charity, you have to be careful that you don't parse everything out separately to go a different directions. I know it's a little bit confusing, but that's probably the biggest thing I saw at St. Paul's, with people talking about what they were going to give to the church, and they were going to give a percentage. But I know darn well, sorry, investment types, they say, hey, this is easy. Just put your beneficiaries as your kids, and you just give us a death certificate when you die. A lot of my will estate planning, when I'm dealing with people, I say, leave everything off except for IRAs and let your will control. Because if you have this real estate, if you have things that are going through probate anyway, you want your will to control everything. So that way you're only changing one document at a time. Go ahead. Finally, healthcare directive, advanced caregiving. This is the end of life decision making. Do you want things terminated? The end of life planning. My favorite of what Berto had up there was peoplesmemorial.org. Excellent resource, nonprofit association. It's REI for death. It's great. You get a card, you get a number, and it will explain a lot of your options fairly simply. Lovely group. And then the same thing for organ donations. They have all the forms there. I will pass out. Again, the goal is on your basic planning. Do a basic will with free will if you want, because you're saying who's going to be in charge of your stuff, what you want done, and let them sort it out. If you have over 2.193 million, 2.2 million, you shouldn't be using free will. You should be going to see Tom. Are you here on the island? Okay, go see Tom. Trust me, if you call me, I will talk to you and give you advice, but I'll say go see Tom, because I won't come up to Orcas Island and deal with all you people. Nothing, as my daughter says, nothing personal, Dad. I say, yeah, thanks. But no, you go see Tom, and you have more estate tax issues and stuff with Washington State. If you have a blended family, husband and wife, and you have children from prior marriages stuff, go see Tom. If you have, if you're going to do a simple gifting with free will to the church, and that's a goal, put it up in your specific request and keep it simple. And you will do fine with the program. But I know it kind of, the whole concept of probate and non-probate is tricky, because a lot of people say we want to avoid probate. We should do a trust. If you're going to try and do a trust, go see Tom. Yeah, I think I've gotten 3 go see Toms so far in this discussion. But keep it simple. Be aware of where your money is going. And I think it's lovely that it's in our ethic. I was raised, I always tell folks, it's my dad said, a good scout leaves a place a little bit better than when he got there. And our goal in our family has always been, we're community oriented, and we're going to attempt to do that. You can do it in avoiding taxes, which adds a little bit more of a halo, gloss to my halo. But you can also do it very simply with free will. But just be very careful. If you start getting real tricky, you may want to go, repeat after me, go see Tom. Okay? Thank you. Well,
Thank you, Keith. Pretty good timing to say your last words and have your alarm go off. So Joe, talk to us a little bit about financial.
You would like to see it?
Just the first one, yeah. This is a hat that says Endow Orcas. And Steve Jung, who was president of our community foundation, will remember about 15 years ago.
Speaking to the mic.
Speaking to the mic, that helps, good. But we're talking about legacy giving, and we had this thing called Endow Orcas on Orcas, where we worked with nonprofits to help cultivate a consciousness about death time giving, what we call legacy giving. And when I got over here today, I said, Martha, would you bring my hat over? So I just want you to know that this topic has been discussed on Orcas for a long time. Did you put that there? I'm going to keep this really simple. We're talking about the mechanics of how you do things in planning. And what I want to focus on is, how do you think about how much either you want to give or perhaps that you're able to give? Okay? How much can you give and when? I listened to the pastor. I was inspired because he talked about his lifetime giving a minimum of 10% and his death time giving 20%. So he used percentages, okay? But the numbers are going to change. So how do you think about what it is you can give in terms of amount and to whom? So here's the 3 questions I always like to ask when I talk with people about legacy giving. Do you have enough for yourself? Do I have enough to support myself? Is there anybody in the room that doesn't think they can support themselves right now? Because we're all here living on Orcas Island. It's a wonderful place. For better or worse, it's expensive, but we've managed to live here, and we're probably okay the rest of the way. Well, you don't, for sure. Yeah, but most of us probably feel reasonably secure. If you don't feel secure in having enough, then probably the issue of giving is tertiary. You're probably not going to spend a lot of time on it, because if you're not comfortable and confident about your living ability, you probably say, I better not give because I have to take care of myself first. But let's suppose you're able to, and you have great confidence in your ability to live and survive the rest of the way. Here's the second question. I think it's the key one. What is an appropriate inheritance for my heirs? Heirs could be children, heirs could be other people you know. What's an appropriate inheritance? The key word is appropriate. I see Nancy nodding. Why are you nodding? And she's hoping her husband's. Tell me why you said yes.
How you want us to do that?
What's an appropriate inheritance?
Maybe it depends on how you were raised, too.
Yeah.
Because some people were raised
Some people were raised to give it all away. Okay. Great question. Great question. Let me tell you a quick story. I had a client who was a retired pilot, and he and his wife, we were talking about their estate planning, and we asked the question, what's an appropriate inheritance to your kids? And he said, none. And I said, why is that? He says, they've all had drug problems. He said, if I gave them $10,000, they'd be dead this year. All right, so his answer was nothing. All right, at the other extreme, most people think of their family first, and they say, of course, I'm going to leave it to my children. I'm going to leave everything. But one of the questions they don't ask is, what's the purpose of leaving everything? What are you trying to accomplish if you leave your children everything? What are you trying to accomplish? What are you providing for? Are you trying to give them a secure income in retirement? Are you trying to give them the capacity to buy a home? We call it having a shopping spree. If you take it what people are going to leave their children, you ask them, what would you want your children to be able to do with the money? It adds a different perspective, a different dimension to the decision. So first question is, do I have enough for myself? The answer is yes. You can say, what's an appropriate inheritance to my children or heirs? And if there's still something left over, then you can go, what do I do with the rest? Okay, what do I do with the rest? The rest could be available. I didn't say you had to give it away, but the rest could be available for charitable contributions. The rest could be available. I'm not sure I want to do that at all. So I'm just, go ahead. I will. And I'll just let you go through. So just to kind of summarize, the goal in thinking about what you have and what you want to give, stop there, is to first look at that circle in the upper hand left and say, do I have financial independence for myself? Am I okay? Second, have I figured out what I want for my family legacy? And third, what do I want to do with the rest? And the rest is what I call social capital legacy, what you give let's say at your passing or during life. How to give and what assets to give, it's a mechanical thing that you work with your financial advisor or your attorney. But the key thing is to go through a thinking process, and I'm just going to share mine generically, and we're actually doing this. We do this about every 2 years. The bishop does it every year. I do it every 2 years. I don't go to my mailbox, but I pull out my diagrams and say, if we died today, if both of us were gone today, what would the kids get? And what we've decided is we've defined what we call an appropriate inheritance for our children. It's an amount of money in a range that we say if they get that, that's more than enough. And everything else that's left is going to our donor advised fund. So you've gotten that pitch today. Donor advised funds are a really, really great tool. But we've defined what's appropriate for our kids, and we've defined what we hope to accomplish. And we're actually having those conversations with our children. In the next 3 months, we're going to be meeting with all 3 of our children independently to talk about these things, because I believe you should talk about it. But we've arrived at the point, it doesn't matter how much we have. Once our kids get what we want them to get, everything else is going to charitable purposes, kind of clean. So that's my message to you, is think about the key questions before you worry about how much you can give. Thank you.
The quote I like, Warren Buffett said, I want to leave enough to my children that they can do anything, but not so much they will do nothing. My wife keeps beating me over the head with, we don't want to spoil it yet.
Yeah.
Here's what our goals are.
Absolutely. Well, thank you very much.
Thank you, Joe. And Bill can add some more. Okay.
Control those machines?
There's 3. Just you can go ahead and hand them out.
Okay.
Are you?
It's better to use this.
Okay, that's fine. Sounds good. Well, I'd like to extend the invitation too. I've got handouts for all the slides, so if you want to take notes, fine, but you don't need to. Also, I'll extend the same invitation for anyone that wants an initial complimentary consultation. You can just reach out to me, and look forward to discussing some of this. The first one is on basically charitable vehicles comparison. And, the cash gifts, I mean, that's a great way to go. And some of these things have already been touched on, for example, donating appreciated securities and the like. Just make sure that it makes far more sense if you have a highly appreciated asset with a significant capital gains exposure, that if you give that to the charity, as already mentioned, it's great because you bypass the capital gains tax and the charity doesn't have to pay any capital gains tax, which is really nice. And you get a nice tax deduction for it as well. Additionally, the qualified charitable distribution was touched on a little bit, but I'll expand on it a little bit. I mean, basically, you're able to donate at the age of 70 and a half. You can start donating up to $100,000 a year from your IRA account to a charity, and none of that money that comes out will be taxable income. Normally, every dollar that comes out of your traditional IRA account will be 100% taxable. But if you take it out of your IRA and you're 70 and a half or older, you will not have to pay, there will be no taxable income, and so it's a real win-win from both sides. For people that are, their required minimum distribution age now is 72, but you can start at 70 and a half. So that's really nice. We have many of our clients that were doing this, and it's very important to note that you can't just take the money out of your IRA first and then give it to the charity. It has to come directly from your IRA, and the custodian takes care of it. So let's say if you're working with, let's say, a Fidelity or a Schwab or a TD Ameritrade, that there's a form that is completed, and then the custodian sends the money directly to the charity. And so you fill out a form with their 501c3 information, their address, and so on. And then all that money gets directed to the charity, which is really nice. So we have some clients that are donating monthly, even to their church, as a qualified charitable distribution. So it's kind of a nice situation. The donor advised fund's been hit a few times, and I really like it too because you can bunch up the deductions. It gives you a lot of flexibility. I know the Arcus Community Foundation has a donor advised fund. Also, my understanding is I'm pretty sure both Fidelity and Schwab also have donor advised funds, and if they don't have the charity you want, they will normally add that for you. And I believe there's no minimum for either one of those. So that's another plus with donor advised funds, because some of the charitable giving vehicles can be, require more money to make it worth your while. But, but with the donor advised fund, it gives you a lot of flexibility. So I really like the donor advised funds. And, you can keep it going, for a long time. I wasn't sure if I was going to touch on these others. These are for more significant sums of money. So I guess I'll throw this out there. Charitable remainder trust I wasn't going to talk on first, but normally you're going to have at least $500,000 for that to be worthwhile for consideration, but I'll kind of give you a thumbnail sketch of how they work, and one of the handouts explains a little bit more about that. But basically, you're able to gift with a charitable remainder trust. You can put a highly appreciated piece of real estate that you can sell inside the trust or securities, and then you get a nice big tax deduction. Then you can start generating an income stream for you during your lifetime. And then upon your demise, the corpus or the principal then goes to charity. So you get a really nice tax deduction up front, and there's a little bit of tax-free income along the way, which is really nice. And if you want to protect the corpus or principal, you could use from the distributions that, the income you're taking, you could buy a life insurance policy to cover the money that you donated to the charity. I mean, that's not always necessary, but I'm just kind of giving you a quick kind of capsule description. And again, one of the handouts that will be passed around will include that information as well. The charitable lead trust is the exact opposite of that. You end up, let me just double check here. The charitable lead trust, yeah, that's right. So it's just the opposite. You're not getting the income stream, basically. You're donating it. Well, actually, hold on a second. I better make sure I have this correct. Yeah. The charitable lead trust, basically, so the income stream goes to the charity. So, and then upon your demise, then the corpus or principal goes to your heirs. So it's the exact opposite of the charitable remainder trust. So, but again, those two vehicles are meant for larger sums of money typically. So I don't think that that's something that you're normally going to want to spend a lot of time with. But let me kind of move through this that talks a little bit more about the donor advised fund too, which is probably the one that's going to be more popular with everybody. So you can see from the chart how it kind of works. You can, you and your spouse or yourself can control the funding. You've got the donor advised fund and the charities. I mean, you literally can and do have some control over where you want the money to go, which is really nice. You obviously have to have a charitable intent. You may want to bunch charitable gifts as well, and the gifts can be maximized to itemized deductions. And it's a nice way to donate highly appreciated assets or securities to, and again, bypass the capital gains tax. And it also creates a really nice record for your gifts as well. And then, as you can see up here, it kind of talks a little bit more about, you want to review the tax impact, some of the things you want to consider, opening the account, and like I already mentioned, identifying securities to donate, and then kind of continuing in some of the other things that I think are worth noting is you get a current year tax deduction, bunching the multiple years, ability to reallocate highly appreciated securities and so on. So, I mean, I think they're really nice, but you also need to be aware the gifts are irrevocable. It's not something you can change. And that's going to be the case for many of these vehicles like the charitable lead trust and the charitable remainder unit trust as well. So again, I probably don't need to spend a lot more time on most of these because like I said, it's all in the handouts, but and also we'll be able to answer questions at the table too.